Hello, everybody. Welcome back for our lecture on the Haitian Revolution. So, we are going to continue on this topic of revolutions under the rule of the French, and we are looking at another major watershed event in the history of the world when we look at Haiti. So, we're going to jump right in here so I can make the video, hopefully, under 15 minutes. So, key questions, we're looking at the same sort of questions that we looked at with the French Revolution. What's leading to the revolution and where their successes and failures lie. So these are the things that you want to pay attention to as you go through the source material. Klooster, as always, is going to give you that background of the narrative of the entire revolution, all of the people who are involved in the revolution's beginning all the way till its end and its legacy. So a few things that I want to point out here to pay attention to is similar to how we're looking at France. All of these remaining revolutions, you want to make sure that you understand the unique conditions of the peoples who live there. So as you should get a sense of, I believe it's the first sentence in this chapter, is Saint-Domingue, which we now know as Haiti, right, was pretty much the wealthiest colony of all colonies in the world. It was definitely much more centrally located in the global economy than the American South was. At the same time, we tend to center slavery on our own nation, but slavery was much more impactful historically in some of these other regions where we have the production of things like sugar. So keep that in mind. Saint Domingue is very central to the global economy, also very central to the global slave system, right? So when we're looking at the dynamics amongst peoples within this system, we've got a series of race relations that Klooster will explain to you in some depth, right? You've got whites, not all of which are of the same sort of position. Not all whites are planters, right? There's whites of a variety of economic backgrounds that live in Haiti. You've got free people of color who include both mulattoes and blacks, and then you have the large slave population. Pretty much everybody is a degree of disenfranchised in this system aside from the planter elite, right? So you want to see if you can understand the dynamics of that. There's also some geographic dynamics. If you're not familiar with the geography of Haiti, you want to make sure that you understand, right? It is on the same island as the Dominican Republic, and so there is some interaction here in an international context with Spain. The British also get involved, as you'll see in the course of this particular chapter, but just so you know what's going on, split amongst the different parts of the colony are also important, just to understand who has control over which parts of the colony in a given time. Ultimately, the Haitian Revolution is successful, right? We can say that fundamentally, yes, it is an overthrow of the system that existed prior to this point, the ending of colonial control by the French. In some ways, we can say that it does come along with some failures, though, because like the other revolutions that we've looked up to this point, democracy doesn't take root in Haiti and is actually fairly dictatorial after the point of the revolution's end, right? So we've got successful uprisings. It's a long journey, right? The first successful beginning of the slave uprising is going to start in 1791. It won't be established as its own independent country until 1804, right? But in the course of being able to achieve these victories and the end of slavery and the establishment of a new nation also results in, at least for a time, right, the end of slavery in all French colonies, as well as in the mother country, right? What ends up happening at the end of the day, right, and one of the sort of lasting legacies of the Haitian Revolution, unfortunately, right, is that it's going to have this this longer term effect on the nation itself because of its treatment by other international powers, including France, right? So France is going to, as you'll see at the end of the chapter, essentially force Haiti into a significant amount of debt to pay for all of the conflicts that had gone on during the course of the war. And then also there are responses by other countries like the United States that are fundamentally detrimental to Haiti, which continues its economic status into decline and puts it into a precarious economic position that exists even into the present. And this is, of course, tied to the issues of slavery and race in terms of the kind of long-term impacts of this sort of rebellion. So one of the things that I want to emphasize in here is because we've got a situation of which we'll have some similar dynamics in some ways when we look at our last section of revolutions, which are the Spanish revolutions, which is where we'll focus quite a bit more here on race and the role of race in determining people's position in a colonial society. In the case of the British, right, in the American Revolution, all of these groups are pretty much excluded. The Native Americans are never welcomed into any component of the Republic. Neither are slaves. And there isn't a whole lot of racial intermixing up to this point in English society, right? It's just the way that the colonies were run. In comparison, when we're looking at Haiti, there is a degree of intermixing, but there's also a sizable black population, a slave population, and they are central and they are the key component of the revolution. So fundamentally different here than the other revolutions we're talking about. When we look at the Spanish revolutions, we will have a lot more racial intermixing in terms of indigenous peoples and European peoples, and so that will also play some key dynamics in understanding how things will play out there. But focusing specifically on Haiti, right? One of the things that Klooster mentions at the end of the chapter is that you want to make sure that you know that this is not just a case of black versus white. This is the reason why we want to really hone in on the planters versus the petit blancs, right? The lower classes of whites who exist in the Haitian society. We also want to focus on people who are mixed race and the sort of position they have in Haitian society, as well as black peoples. And then there's a variety of positions that black peoples have in Haitian society, because there are free blacks, like we see in the case of some of our revolutionary leaders like Toussaint Louverture, right? And then there are people who come from a slave background, and so they have different positions in the society as well. We know that there's quite a bit of infighting amongst these groups over the course of the revolution, and many of these groups will be expelled over the course of the revolution, right? Whites, for the most part, will be expelled, killed, or will voluntarily immigrate, right, due to the conditions of the revolution over a period of time. You'll have a major split between black revolutionaries and mixed race revolutionaries as well. Although there will be an eventual sort of bringing together into a singular nation by the end of this time frame, right? So there's that sort of component that is important to understanding how the revolution evolves over time, right? Because you start off with this idea that's really embedded in the planter class is not really that different in some ways than some of the other revolutions that we're looking at in the colonies, specifically the American Revolution, because that's what we've covered up to this point. I won't talk about the Spanish revolutions yet. But this kind of idea of economic autonomy, right? Coming out from under the thumb of the control of the mother country. There's a lot of discussion on those issues and how to push back against colonial control, and the bringing in of French officials to try to enforce colonial control over a period of time. So this is how it starts, right? But then we have this major shift beginning with the slave uprisings that use the terminology that is being circulated in the region for different purposes, right? So that's why we want to understand all of the different dynamics that are taking place. We're also interested in the types of revolutionaries that come to the forefront as the revolution goes on, right? Because we do have these really well-known figures in the Haitian Revolution that are key to understanding the revolution's development, right? The kind of joining together behind a certain figure the ability for, the sort of the military prowess of some of these figures over a period of time. But fundamentally, right, the difference with some of these leaders to, say, an American Revolution, but could also have some similarities to some of the leaders in the French Revolution, right, is that they may use the language of the Enlightenment in promoting the ideas of liberty and equality and freedom, but once they come into power, for the most part, will institute a dictatorship and will also seek to maintain the economic system that's already in place in Haiti, which this is not necessarily, in the case of, say, Toussaint Louverture, is not about maintaining slavery, but is about trying to maintain Haiti's economic position in the global arena, which regardless will become, uh, you know, heavily affected by the revolution and the end result of the revolution. So if we're looking at, right, how the Enlightenment does play a role then in the Haitian Revolution, just because there are dictatorial efforts that take place after the revolution or at the endpoints of the revolution that impact Haiti going forward, right? Democracy, again, doesn't take root in Haiti. Not unlike we we're talking about with the French Revolution, it doesn't mean that it's not relevant or it doesn't have a role kind of reverberating outward from the revolution itself. So we know that the Haitian Revolution is being influenced by things that are happening in France, right? The Declaration of the Rights of Man, which we talked about last week, coming back into play here, right? Because the things that are being talked about in the Declaration of Rights of Man, these quotes that I've put in the PowerPoint slide, are very key to understanding how people take those ideas and run with them when we talk about not just about slaves, right? It's not only about the slaves, it is about free blacks and free people of color in Haiti who are not achieving or have access to the level of rights that whites have in that society, even though they feel like they fit within the bounds of what the declarations of the rights of man and citizen are saying, right? So if these things are being disseminated outward into the rest of France, right, then why is it not applicable to these other groups that are living in the colonies? Starts to become the question, right? And as you know from Klooster, when you read it, there's already tension right there between these different groups and who has power within the colony. So there's that fundamental component. The things that are happening in the French Revolution are influencing what's happening in Haiti. But interestingly, right, and the podcast is actually really good at kind of explaining this in an understandable way. Haitians, especially the slaves who are fomenting rebellion, right, they are not a lot of the people who are on the ground, right, not the leaders necessarily, but kind of the everyday person who is putting their life on the line for this revolution, is not literate, right? So to have a mass movement of people, like we've talked about in any revolution, how do they start to understand ideals of the Enlightenment and start to advocate for them in their own lives? Is we've got this interesting relationship due to this sort of way in which Haiti is structured, right? There's a series of rumors that are kind of making their way around the colony that people start to understand as truth, even when they're not. We have people who are coming in and out of the colony, even as the French are trying to suppress the amount of information, right? Or the upper classes within Haiti are trying to suppress this information from making its way into public ears. There's still means of communication from the planters themselves who had already been talking about these issues, right? When they're talking about their own attempts at gaining independence from the mother country. You've got other French sailors who are coming into the area for economic purposes, who are maybe disseminating certain ideas, especially as these ideas about ending slavery become more and more popular in the mother country as well. And so literacy, even though we talk about literacy in something like the American Revolution, it's worth us talking about in the Haitian Revolution because the level of literacy is not there, and yet the ideas of the Enlightenment still make their way throughout the colony and heavily influence the decisions that are being made by people like Louverture, right, in leading to rebellion and the creation of a new nation. The other document that you have to look at to kind of bring this all together for you is going to be the Haitian Declaration of Independence, which is going to come into being when Haiti is established, right? So it's going to be under Dessalines. Dessalines is, right, essentially a dictator, but the verbiage that's used in the Haitian Declaration of Independence is worth looking at, right? Because it gives us a sense of the conversations that were happening in terms of concepts of liberty, what liberty was supposed to look like. I've given you a short secondary source that supplements the primary source so that you can understand its meaning within the time period, right? And so you get a sense of who are all the sort of groups that were being spoken to in this declaration. Who is the declaration for, right? People within the colony, to the mother country, to other countries and peoples. There is a little bit of something there for everyone, as the secondary source will tell you. But since we're coming back to this question again and again, right, of what is this revolution attempting to achieve, we get a sense at this point in the declaration, right, their views toward the mother country, but also there's this key component of race and the institution of slavery that is so heavily embedded in the Haitian Revolution in ways that it's not in the other revolutions we've covered to this point, that make it so fundamentally different in the types of liberty and equality that we're talking about in this particular event. So ending here on global impacts to, again, help you to think about how you want to answer this Module 2 assignment question. The PowerPoint and the discussion being had in the PowerPoint is going to really heavily advocate for the idea that the Haitian Revolution is a very fundamental component of understanding the history of this period and its larger impacts and its level of how radical it is in comparison to the other revolutions that we cover in this time period. And in many ways, this is true, right? The level of liberty and equality afforded to a diversity of peoples in the Haitian Revolution is beyond any sort of discussion that was really had in something like the American Revolution, in which slavery is heavily present in the economic system of the new nation. There isn't really a whole lot of discussion that's being had about how this is going to impact the slave population when the American Revolution happens, right? So the Haitian Revolution is, because it's directly a slave rebellion, the most successful, most widespread, largest slave rebellion in the history of the world, right? Then it is fundamental to understanding what the revolution is all about. So you've got this really successful rebellion, truly from the bottom up, right? It is these lower classes of people within the society that are successfully overthrowing the system that existed prior to that point. It is both ending slavery and it is ending the colonial control of France. In the process, ending slavery in France and her other colonies at that time. In terms of a revolutionary effort and a watershed moment of change in the history of the world, also the first Black Republic, right, is fundamentally racially defined. And that is true both in the moment of how they think about themselves. The textbook, I think we'll talk about, there's a period of time in which they want to refer to every Haitian as being Black. And so this is where we get a sense of, even if people in Haiti are not fully Black, it is so keenly tied to their national identity. That's the case in terms of self-definition, also the case in terms of definition by outsiders, right? So going back to what I was talking about in terms of its long-term impacts on a country like Haiti, in the immediate, countries like the United States will acknowledge that Haiti is a country, an independent nation, but it brings with it a huge amount of fear in countries, specifically the United States, where slavery still exists. You've got people who had immigrated out of Haiti into the American South. So you've got slaves that are from Haiti, you've got planters that are from Haiti who are discussing the slave rebellion, the violence of the slave rebellion, and there is a massive amount of fear in the United States of what the implications of a rebellion like this is. And there are other slave uprisings that are influenced by Haiti that happen in, say, New Orleans, right? And it's not that far from the American South, right, geographically. So there is a lot of action taken by the United States to essentially reduce the amount of power or economic independence or prominence or success that Haiti has, because they don't want this particular project to succeed. It's fundamentally detrimental to the American economic system. And so, same thing is true in terms of treatment by other world powers. And you get a sense of that in the later parts of the revolutionary effort in Haiti as well, right? Multiple attempts to bring back slavery, to bring Haiti back under colonial control. And so, this has short and long term impacts on the country. The concepts of race and racism continue to be highly significant in global history past the point of Haiti's independence. But what it does as well, in the process of fomenting all this fear amongst the American public and other areas in which slavery still exists, is it brings the slavery question to the forefront, right? By making this such a big issue, then we start to have further debate about the slavery question and how slavery is going to continue and whether slavery should continue going forward. So we can credit Haiti's revolution in part for advancing that question in other areas and ending slavery on a global scale. The other thing that you might want to ask yourself, just like we asked ourselves about, well, can we credit all of France's impacts in the larger global world to the American Revolution? So we can ask ourselves the same question of how much do we credit Haiti's revolution with the French? Well, obviously there are elements of the French Revolution that impact Haiti. The podcast will talk about this as well, but keep in mind, right, the role of France in Haiti's revolution is ultimately to end it, right, and to prevent it from happening. There isn't necessarily long-term support for the Haitian revolutionary effort, even when there are points in which during the revolution, the Jacobins, for example, are supporting the end of slavery. They are not necessarily fully aligned with the revolutionary efforts that is not just about ending slavery, but is about autonomy from the mother country, right? So keep in mind, right, the goals of Haiti versus the goals of France in the process of Haitian Revolution. To end us here, Module 2 assignment. I'm not going to talk too much more about it. If you have questions about this, feel free to email me and I'll put out announcements as I get questions about this. But we're, as I mentioned last week, answering this question of which of these three revolutions do you find to be the most impactful, right? You have to talk about each revolution, so you show me that you understand what each of them are about and what they have achieved, and then from that information, that's how you're making your determination about which one you feel like is the most impactful of the three. Make sure that you're following all of the guidelines on Canvas about how to write the paper. If I gave you any feedback from Module 1 that you weren't doing correctly, make sure you're making those adjustments as you go. And on that note, I will leave us here, ending on the Haitian Revolution and ending our Module 2 information. We'll see you back for the Spanish revolutions and as we close out the course.